Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope everyone's having a great week so far. We're here to bring a little holiday cheer, or maybe not so much, to your conversation about tech strategy. I'm Kyler Cheatham. And if this is your first time on the Confluential Live, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back and joining us on Friday mornings to kind of unpack what we're seeing in the marketplace. We have kind of a fun, themed conversation today, but it really goes into a lot of what we see in the marketplace, which is a simple lack of technology discipline. And so we're going to kind of go through that in a conversation today, whether it be like whoever needs to hear this. But mostly, this is going to be your silver bullet to technology success in your strategies is being honest, having good processes, having a healthy business. So, yeah, we're excited to have this conversation. As always, I'm joined by Adam, and I'll let him introduce himself in just a second here. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of these different places. So wherever you're joining us from, if you want to drop your conversation or your questions in the comments, we're always very, very willing to take questions during this time or just engage in different dialogues. So with that, good morning, Adam. Welcome to How the Grinch Stole Your Tech Discipline.
Good morning. Thanks for everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of Confluential. I'm excited about this conversation, partially because the Grinch stealing your tech discipline infers that if you just power through and hold hands and sing it out at the end, it will come back. And that's not how that happens, right? You don't get discipline back without discipline in the first place, so you kind of have to recover it on your own. There's a little bit of a hard way of doing that. So the Grinch is truly not going to help you out in this. So we'll talk about it and we'll see how we do.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big piece of this. He'll be right back. So don't worry about it. But I think that's a big piece is the different takes on how you can look at this. There's a balance between, powering through and grinding and being honest with how your actual technology is going to work. We sometimes have people champion a system or a new process or say that like trust falls and kumbaya work is going to heal everything. And we all know that's not the truth, which if you follow me and my conversations, I hate the word change management because I feel like it's a cop out to not doing good business work. So let's do a question first, right? How would you define tech discipline? Adam, define it for us.
Well, what a great question. So your tech discipline. This has to do with focusing on the concept of technology enabling the business for value, and then maintaining a system that allows you to do that with, I try not to use the word discipline in this, but with a heavy regard for things like security and best practice, right? We don't need to just build things. A great example is in development, there are protocols for making sure that you create and test code before you push things to production, right? That's a good tech discipline. That's usually not something that people lose sight of very often. But when we start thinking about losing tech discipline, you have to start thinking about it from a perspective of tying nice and tight to the business requirements and then being a good steward of the relationship with the business. And those are good starting points that we'll talk through today.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big piece that honestly is missed. We see a lot of very simple mistakes. You don't know what you don't know, right? These are projects that not everyone does, especially in the modern enterprise when we've got a lot of different systems simply trying to talk to each other, right? We might not even be in a situation where we need new technology or anything like that, but we do need some sort of single source of truth or processes that are going to allow all of our systems to talk to each other so that we can make the best business decisions possible. And a lot of times that's missed by just good, strong project management in that type of thing. Also, with the rise of AI and requirements, right? A lot of people think that you can just run that through ChatGPT, pass it, to vendors, and you're good to go. A lot of RFPs are now written by ChatGPT, which I think there's room for some of that, but not when it comes to really like digging into the discipline of writing business requirements. Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important, not only on the requirement side, but like to have a purpose? Like, what are you trying to achieve in these conversations?
Well, I mean, if you set out on a journey and you just start walking, how do you know you're going to get someplace useful at all? Right?
Mm.
It's the same thing in this. If you just start working on some things and some stuff, how do you know that they're going to be useful at all? And if they're not useful, then they're wasteful, right?
Mhm.
So if we are not dedicating our resources to something that is oriented towards creating value that the business wants, then why are we doing it? I said, well, maybe the answer is, well, because there's a security thing here, or we are fixing something that was broken a long time ago, and we have the time to do it. There are bits and pieces like that, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't serve some sense of support for the business achieving its goals, then we're just doing things and stuff. And I'm 100% certain that if you walked into the office of your CEO today and said, just so that you know, I've decided that my job description is just going to be things and stuff. You laugh at it, but I'm just going to do some things and some stuff,
Yeah.
and see what happens. There aren't very many people that can get away with that,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
would encourage you to believe that you're not one of them.
Absolutely. I mean, and
Right?
that sounds ridiculous, right? But there's a lot of people, especially at larger organizations, that really kind of skate that things and stuff
Yeah.
guideline. And I think there's a balance between like how you meet executive expectations, right? Like we see a lot of like, we need the AIs, we need all the AIs. And the, project team is like, all right, like what are you hoping to do? Are you hoping for like predictive AI that can help you in forecasting and help in enterprise assets management, or are you looking for Gen
Yeah.
AI that can
What
help
do
you
you
with
need? What is it
emails?
actually going to do?
Exactly.
Right? And if you don't have an answer to that, then what are you doing?
Yeah, and I think
You're
that's
spending money.
a big piece. And that's a good, kind of segue to this question of like, what does it take to write great requirements? Like, what does it
That's-
take to, and you got to
I
know
don't-
that if you don't write discipline requirements, the vendor will fill it in with whatever they want to sell you. So
Yeah,
it's very important. It's like going to war and having your, battle plan placed and knowing that
you
the,
need a weapon.
behind
Okay,
exactly.
here's a stick. That's a weapon. All right. What? So now I wanted to, there are a couple ways of doing this. What does it take to write great requirements? And this is actually a fantastic question because it's not as simple as it would appear on the surface. The first is, what is the purpose of this list of requirements, right? And what are we going to do with it? I've got one list of requirements for one client that's very level one, very high level. I need to be able to manage my assets. I need to be able to create predictive planning for preventative maintenance. That's level one stuff, right? I don't have a ton of requirements in that, but they're just getting started as a business. Like they don't plan to actually open until June, right? So level three, level four requirements, not as big a deal. We got to figure out how we know what our major processes are, and then have a vendor help us fill in the gaps. And then as we fill in the gaps and start building a system, things get more refined, right? The next piece of it is on the level of what are we writing requirements for? Is we're writing it for a system selection. And there is a sense of this, which is they need to be low enough detail that you can create a checklist, right? Like I need to go grocery shopping. I need food. All right, cool. We know we need to go. We know we have to do that. We don't know exactly what we need. We don't know exactly what we're going to make, but we've got to find a direction in it. That's fine at the level one. At level two, it's I need to be able to prepare 5 meals with each with a protein, a starch, and a veg. for the over the next 3 days. Okay, so I know that gives me some guidance on that, and that gets down to the level of I need to be able to run a three-way match where I'm matching my invoices to my receipts to my sales orders, right? Or purchase orders, right? What did I receive? What did I buy? And what did I get charged? On the flip side, what did I ship? What did I get paid for? And what did I make? Three-way matches, right? And then when we start digging a little bit deeper, they need to include this type of caveat, that type of caveat. You start to get down to the level of detail, which is now how does a system fit your needs? And that's a different level of requirements, which is allowed to be a little bit higher level because I need to know how systems solve for these higher level problems because I'm starting from scratch. I don't have any real restrictions that aren't business oriented, right? So the purpose in those is I need to be able to give a list of requirements to a series of vendors and have them say with clarity, can it do it? Yes or no. And that it needs to be as black and white as it can be, right? If you're using words like the system must be fast, the system must be intuitive, the system must have a good user interface. That might be different for me than it is for you. What might be fast to me might be slow to you, right? So yeah, you know what? It is fast. It's super fast. Our transactions take under 60 seconds. That's terribly slow. That's miserable. But you can leave it open to interpretation, and it will be interpreted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when you're writing requirements for RFPs, you need to get specific to a level of detail, which get around the salesman's ability to say, yeah, sure, it can do that ish.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove the ish from the question, that's a part of the great requirement. When we get down to a different level of tech discipline, we get down to a different level of requirements detail. And what's important about this is now I know my system. Now I'm building my system, not choosing it, but building it. And now we had to have level 3, level 4 detailed requirements. The system must create a purchase order with the following lines: customer name, customer address, customer ship to, customer bill to, whatever, and then a detailed line item presentation of every single thing that was ordered with the price, with the quantity, with the taxes. It sums at the end. Like this is when we start getting into very specific, where now it's not a can it do it yes or no, it's a what exactly must be built. And if it's not on that list of requirements that exactly must be built, it won't get built. It
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't. That's the purpose of great requirements in this space. And I realize that I'm on a little bit of a monologue on requirements. You touched on us. You hit a touchy subject for me because I'm a very requirements oriented person. But
Oh,
requirements are the backbone of the whole tech discipline, right? And
absolutely. And that's why I asked you straight up that question, because I think it's important that people know that, especially with the rise of Gen AI that
mhm,
can quote unquote write your requirements. Absolutely not. Like, if you want to spend tens of $1,000s extra a month on things that you didn't need on a bloated system, absolutely. But you have to understand that that's not at all how that works. So I think that's an important piece of like, that is the foundation in which you're building your tech discipline on.
mhm,
Is we're not going to take the easy way out, right? And it's not the easy way out. Couldn't be more clear about that. It's the wrong way out, right? It's
yeah.
not at all a solution. And that's a piece that we need to be able to talk about. So
One, your tech discipline doesn't just come from IT; it comes from the business too, right? So when we're thinking through requirements, this one of my favorite examples from my career is building an app. Wrote a whole slew of requirements for login authentication. They had to be able to log in against this. They had to use Active Directory, all of those types of things. And this wonderful, beautiful login page is wildly authentic. It's totally secure. It looks exactly like designed. So you log into the app. You know what was left out? How do you log out of this app? Well, there weren't any requirements for that, so we didn't build it. at first you say as a business, well, why in the world didn't you build a logout function? And the answer is actually correctly, it wasn't in the requirements. That's actually not the developer's fault in this case. The requirements didn't say build me a logout function. The business didn't say I need a logout function. The failure in this is in the liaison piece of it, in walking through the design of the system. This is an architect, a PM, a business analyst thing that doesn't write code, that is a part of your tech discipline. What needs to be in this? Did we miss something? And then part of your tech discipline is also to be flexible in saying, you know what? That was a pretty stupid thing to forget. We need to be able to log out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have a significant security problem, right? If you're logged in forever and you never get out, we are exposed. So we got to write that in. Is IT super stoked about the fact that now they got to go and write more requirements? It's going to impact our deadline, this and the other. No. But you know what? Sometimes things don't go exactly as they're planned to. And part of tech discipline isn't about getting it right every single time on time. It's about figuring out what right is collaboratively and working together and understanding what we need to fix. So anyway, I'm still boxing a bit because requirements are wildly important.
Well, and I think you went above requirements of just expectations, right? A lot of times admitting something is wrong or it's not working the way we thought it would work, right? Is a level at which people take into account their value at the company, and that's that on both sides, which is difficult to achieve, right? Needs to be something that is a level setting expectation. It's not at all a failure point. It's we have to be able to talk about these things and surface this level issue. So this one, I think is really good. It's a longer comment, which is totally fine. But I think in summarizing it, we have all of these, like kind of this situation is different, right? And I think this also is influenced by kind of the industry language of flexibility, of agility. At one point, does flexibility just become organized chaos with documentation? And where do you kind of draw that line of like, of course, we want a flexible system, but we also need to have standard operating processes that we can measure against, right?
Well, the part of tech discipline that this is touching on is governance, right? This situation is different. Okay, why? How? And why does that matter, right? That's one of the things I'm talking to one of our clients with right now. Like, okay, so we have some strict guidelines for governance in our project for our build, and there are some questions as to, yeah, we can't do it out of the box because I want it this way and they want it that way, and both are configurations. We can't do it out of the box because neither of us want that. Okay, so you're telling me that not only do you disagree with the software, you disagree with the chips. We got to figure this conversation out, and then they start to kind of have this standoff of my situation is different. No, my situation is different. My difference is bigger than yours, and blah 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 blah. Does this matter? What would happen if you both didn't get what you wanted? Well, it really wouldn't look as good to me as I wanted to. I don't care. You're asking for a heavy customization because it doesn't look right to you, because it doesn't look like what you have today, you mean. Looks and feel are not, that's change intelligence, right? We need to be adaptable in this. And our governance structure should allow us to ask that question. What's the difference? Why is it important? Why does that difference matter? And then, does it matter enough for us to do it differently than out of the box? And in this case, the answer is no, right? Like we set strict guidelines for timeline and scope management. And this is out of scope and it doesn't matter. I realize that it's to pick on your one thing and say your one thing doesn't matter is a part of the challenge, but this is where change intelligence comes in instead of change management, right? They're trying to manage a change, right? And they're trying to figure out how to manage it so that it is pulled into their way of thinking, so that we're focusing on adoption, adaptability, whatever. The best way for me to adopt this system is for it to look as much like the system that I'm using today as possible. That's not useful. That is, it's change management. We're managing the change. We're communicating effectively, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not effective. This is why change intelligence is more important,
Mhm,
where you say, I need my team to be adaptable. I
mhm,
need my team to see differently what can be and then be more focused on discipline and being able to adjust to circumstances, not at go live, but through the process of the build. And then we can start thinking about, does this matter? No, it doesn't. Okay. It's like, because at the end of the day, do you want to be the one that has to stand in front of the CEO and he says, why are you wasting my time with this request?
mhm.
And if your answer is no, I don't want to stand in front of that. Well, then maybe you should think about whether or not your request would be wasting your time, because he's probably the one that's got to approve whether or not you get what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And we have to understand prioritization. Well, and that's one of the hardest pieces to be able to, kind of stand and toe that line as the project management team, right? It's not easy to do that, especially when you have a lot of different people pulling for a lot of different things. And I think that's where a lot of those disciplinary pieces can fall, because that's very hard, and it requires a very supportive hierarchy structure, right? If they are not listening to the project management, well, then we need a director involved that's comfortable being like, listen, that's not happening. And then we need their director involved, right? So there needs to be levels at which the
Yeah.
the hierarchy of the organization is supporting that, and hopefully, that fight never reaches the CIO. But if it does, right, that position has to be prepared to make that decision as well. That's a disciplinary hierarchy organizational design of understanding at every level. That needs to be a supportive chain, not going above and below and all of these different things, to make things happen. So,
What I
yes.
love, there's a part of this that I like, and then there's another comment I'm going to tie it to. How do you tell the difference between adapting intelligently and just slowly abandoning your own standards? That's a good question. It's also related to what's the cost of discovering missing requirements late in the project. And the reason that I like to tie these two comments together is, from a certain perspective, adapting intelligently may mean
Mhm,
abandoning your standards, right? It's like, my standard is that what this system does this way. That is the standard. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. We are getting that, is going away. That, as it lives and breathes today, is going away. So, what does the future look like? Yeah. So when we start thinking about that, our ability to abandon our standards, there's a fine line in this, right? Where did we? How does our discipline allow us to appropriately abandon our standards and
mhm,
stick to them where we should? Yeah, where, yes, we got to do this. No, we don't need to do that. That is absolutely ridiculous, right? It's the difference in it, and this is ties into the missing late requirements, is, are we doing this because we've become lackadaisical, right? Are we doing this because we got lazy? It's just easier to abandon the standards of governance than it is to abandon the standards of best practice.
mhm,
It's easier to say that, well, that requirement's missing, so we're not going to build it. and
mhm,
and stay rigorous on that. Well, tough luck, man. You didn't write the ability to log out into it, so it's
mhm.
not gonna be there. Actually, we need to have a rigorous plan and some discipline in saying out loud, on both sides, we missed this set of requirements,
Mhm,
and we still need to build it.
mhm,
And sometimes that means that somebody's gonna have to say, that was my fault. We missed that.
mhm.
I missed that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. This
Yeah.
discipline doesn't have to be disciplinarian, right? It doesn't have to be
Right.
punitive. It needs to be structural. And that's the difference. So, from a perspective of missing requirements late in the
Right.
project, there is a cost to that. And sometimes it's scope, sometimes it's timeline, and those types of things. But sometimes it just is the cost of missing those requirements late in the process is less than the cost of missing them at go live, right? If they're
Yeah.
not in there and we have a problem, then What are you gonna do? No, we're not gonna build that. Well, then we're not gonna have a system that works. Yeah. So
Would you rather stop a project midstream to reset discipline or keep moving, knowing that rework is almost guaranteed, or phase two?
rework will always be guaranteed, no matter what you do. Assume that, right? That we're gonna have break fixes. That's part of what testing is, right? Testing is by definition rework. Yeah, I built it. It doesn't work, so I have to do it again and rebuild it. Yeah, that's a part of the project. Would I rather stop a project midstream to reset discipline or keep moving? This is another one of those. Where are we at with this, right?
Mhm.
Do we have a discipline problem? Or am I just resetting discipline so that I can become more black and white, and I'm trying to use it as an excuse to abandon flexibility, right? Well, I didn't like
Mhm.
how this one. I hate to tell you, the smallest of projects out there is hard.
Yeah,
They're gonna have problems.
absolutely.
It just is
Yeah,
that way. Don't
yeah,
mistake a problem for a lack of discipline. Don't
yeah.
mistake a problem for something that needs to be reacted to. It just needs to be fixed, right? You know,
Mhm.
it's just part of life. Sometimes you walk out to your car in the morning, you're running late, and your windshield is covered in frost. What are you gonna do? Drive anyway because you're late? Like, no.
Sounds like you might have experienced that this morning, so fresh on your mind. But
We
I think
were
the reason I brought up this question is because, like, how do you know? And that piece of it is, like, do you have the discipline enough as a project leader, as, the executive sponsor, to really understand that there's something wrong in the project? I think that's, like, the hidden thesis of this conversation is, like, surfacing those issues sounds fine, but in a lot of organizations, that's not welcome. And even in the biggest technology failures we've seen, many times it's because how bad it was went through filters to the
yeah,
leadership team, and they didn't know, right? It was this urgent situation where they were going to be able to stop producing candy in October. Like, they weren't aware of those things. So I that that piece of this question of where is the level of your organization? Are you disciplined enough as a leader or as a project leader to know that sometimes mistakes will happen? That's absolutely fine. And you can fail forward as a team. That is few and far between, especially in our
yeah,
corporate American world.
absolutely. One, I think that the question that you're asking there is also kind of related to this other one from Avery. You know, if the PM isn't being heard, we need a direct involved, but doesn't that just move the goalposts, right?
Mhm.
The difference in this is, do you have somebody on your team, on your side, that has the experience to know the difference between what's hard and what's wrong? That's what we're talking about here from
Mhm.
a discipline perspective. And a lack of discipline is not having the leadership and the confidence to know the difference and stand by the difference between what's hard and what's wrong, right?
Mhm.
If we know the difference, we can address it, right? If
Mhm.
it's just hard, sometimes the answer is this sucks, this is hard, and you know what? We're gonna get through it together. And that's the answer. That's the appropriate path, is to just keep moving and keep hammering away.
Mhm.
Other times there's something wrong, and that becomes a different challenge, right? We have something that needs to be addressed, and we need to understand what level of addressing it is. It's almost like the difference between a risk and an issue, right? A risk is something that might happen. We need to plan for it, maybe, depending on whether or not it is something that could be a significant problem,
Mhm.
but it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
An issue has. We have a problem right here, right now. The difference between hard and the difference between wrong is very similar to the difference between a risk and an issue. The only difference is it's much easier to tell the difference between a risk and an issue than it is to
Mhm.
tell the difference between what's hard and what's wrong. So in this particular question, there's a this actually conveys that difference quite nicely. Doesn't that just move the goalpost? If the director gets overruled, do we escalate
Yeah.
to the VP
Yeah.
and the C-suite? Actually, this is a failure of your governance process. This
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is written like it sounds hard, right? But what's actually happening is somebody didn't get what they want.
Exactly.
And that decision is being
Exactly.
challenged and it's escalated. The only reason that a decision gets escalated is because the level that we were trying to address it at, we are not able to address it at.
Mhm.
If we are able to address it, the director is able to actually address this problem, then it's been addressed. There's no reason to escalate. But if the director, and this is kind of a governance structure thing, right? So
Yeah.
director, VP, C-suite is more of a hierarchy that conveys a governance structure. But if you're thinking about project management, you have core team, you have
Mhm.
um, sponsor, you have steering committee. And sometimes the steering committee sits above the sponsor, sometimes the sponsor sits above the steering committee, depending on your structure. But those are levels of escalation.
Mhm.
If the core team is unable to resolve this problem, it goes up a level.
Yeah.
If the steering committee is unable to resolve that problem, then it gets escalated a level. If it gets
Mhm.
decided at the steering committee level, then the sponsor, if there is a sponsor above it or the sponsors below it, we can talk about that in a moment as well.
Mhm.
If it's addressed, it should never go up another level.
Yeah.
If it needs to go up another level, then it should, right? We got to know the difference.
Yeah.
Uh, but in this case, if we're going to, well, it's been addressed, and then we got to go tattletale, that's
Yeah.
we have a different problem in
Yeah.
discipline.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Yeah, and that will happen, right, in a lot of different projects. But when it does, it's certainly a leadership cultural problem that just needs to be addressed. And usually it's just, one stakeholder in that conversation that really wants something that they're not getting.
It's
But I
harder
think
than
that what's that?
but it's harder than that though. What usually happens in this scenario is we have a resolution, and somebody who you're the VP, right? You're the CEO even, and you have somebody who you have trusted for 15 years that every single thing they tell you is worth its weight in gold. You have given them the autonomy to make decisions, and then they come and say, "This decision was wrong. I disagree with it." And then you go breathing down the neck of your sponsor or your PM or whatever and say, "Why is he or she so mad at me for this? Fix it." That's where that conversation goes, right? You go to your executive and say, "I didn't get what I wanted, and this is why it's important." And that executive, without listening to the whole picture, is now upset because the person he or she's been trusting for 15 years because they've made such good decisions is upset, and so now they're in, "I need to fix that" mode. That doesn't matter. And what that executive needs to be able to do is say, "Why? Did we have the appropriate decision making structure in this? And did we make a decision based on our governance for this program, for this project?" And the answer to that should be yes. And at that point, that executive's response should be, "Then what's the problem?" Right? But that's a weird scenario to be in because we're changing software, yeah? This is a change management challenge where I want it like it's always been. And the answer to how it's always been might be, you know what you're asking for is going to add 6 months and $1 million to our timeline. And you, the tattletale, might not care because it's not your money, it's your
Mhm.
job, right? You can't see it being different. So now you want something different. Now you're going to go up the chain so that you can break through the governance process that has appropriately decided not to give you what you want. And I hate to tell you, as a person who's been trusted for 15 years, you are not going to get 100% of the things that you want from your software implementation, especially if it's a new program.
Mhm.
It's just going to be that way. So you go into tattletaling, all you've done is created a mess, and you've burned your credibility with your core team and the decision making structure for the sake of leveraging your previous relationships. I understand it's a normal reaction, but your executive's job at that point. I spent a lot of time coaching executives in the process of this type of a challenge and saying, did you ask them why they didn't get what they wanted? Or did you
Mhm,
just pick up the phone and start yelling at people?
mhm.
What do you think is the normal answer?
Well, I think, I mean, in this position, they're used to being the main decision maker. Like, and so it's hard to turn that off. So I guarantee that they just picked their phone up and started yelling at people, but because it's not a normal situation, right? Trying to modernize technology strategy in 2026 is not an easy thing to do because you're bridging the gap between these tenured employees that have been doing the same thing for 15 years. Well, we cannot do the same thing. We have to evolve as a business and move in that direction. But again, it takes strong leadership and really like an intentional choice to do that, which is why alignment's important in the beginning, but also that ownership of like the repeatable decision making pieces, and each process of the overall project. You're never going to solve someone that wants to be heard by the CEO or whatever. Go yell at the CEO, go do whatever you're going to do. But at the same time, all that people, can achieve is in their circle of influence in these conversations. Even if your business doesn't have discipline, you need to have discipline, whether that
Yeah.
means that you transfer it to another organization that values it more. But from an individual contributor or even a mid-manager level, there's always going to be executives are going to do what they do. Is it a good choice? No. Are they wasting time and money? For sure, when they do those types of things. But again, humans will be humans. So I think the biggest thing in this conversation is you do what you do to make sure that your project is disciplined. If you're a leader and a decision maker, there's going to be a lot that you need to navigate and change through this, which is why businesses like ours exist. Because you don't know what you don't know, especially if you're not a technical CEO. And then
Yeah.
you don't need to be in the weeds of all of these different systems. The CEO should have no idea that there was no login screen, right? Your team should be able to fix that on that level or log out screen, whatever. So I think that's a big piece
Yeah.
of understanding that.
Now, let's flip this around though and say, what if that person was right? They escalated to their leadership because I've trusted you for 15 years and you're actually right. So the process goes through uh, that executive picking up the phones and first seeking to understand, why did we make this decision and why do you think it is incorrect? So that's there's an informational piece of it that needs to be understood. What is the impact? Why is it important? And if the answer is it's important because I didn't get what I wanted, and that's because I've always had it this way, that's a different need. But let's say you're right. You escalated this to your team because you really feel strongly about it, which is going to happen. And there are scenarios out there where you'll be right. What that is that's a failure of your governance structure. That's a failure in governance discipline, right? If you're right, then this got resolved at the wrong level, and so the person who made the decision and the team that made the decision against your will didn't see it how appropriately, and now we have a different discipline problem. Yeah, where the core team made a decision, you disagree with it, you thought it should have been escalated, and the PM said, "No, we're not. We're going to keep moving." Like, actually, this is a bigger problem than you think it is. So I'm going to go and I'm going to escalate it. Now, in this scenario, though, we've had a governance failure, and that we are not appropriately seeing the impact of the problem. So we got to ask, why are we not seeing this impact appropriately and getting it into the hands of the right decision makers? And that's a difference in problem. That's a difference in your project governance structure's ability to see what ought to be escalated into what levels, and there's a definitional structure that needs to be fixed in that. So there are like I don't want to paint this as the one guy that always goes to his executive is a tattletale, blah blah blah. But if you get your discipline right, you minimize this number of circumstances, and that escalation outside of the process becomes easy. That's
Yeah.
the the discipline structure.
Yeah, I don't know if easy is the right word, right? But like definitely at least
Yeah. Maybe.
more simple, right? I don't know that we can ever have a governance structure that's going to be perfect 100% of the time, right? There has to be a level at which, yes, we need to make sure that 99.9% of the time we can make these decisions, but there also has to be a level of adaptability, in that, like, sometimes we might learn through this process that we need to change something in the governance, and we have to be able to be enough of a flexible team and have the mutual respect for one another to know
Certainly.
that everyone here has best intentions in mind. So cool. All right. Let's go to this one. What do you do when your individual discipline decisions directly contradict what will make you successful in organization's actual reward structure?
This is a very interesting question. And my response to it will be, what do you normally do when two different teams have two totally different reward structures and the decision making process in one contradicts the other? Like this circumstance isn't isolated to your tech programs, right? This happens all over the place. Sales folks are incented to increase revenue. Yeah, I'm going to sell whatever I can. If I can, as long as I can get a signature, we are good to go. Yeah. And then operations says, what did you just do? There's no way on God's green earth I can produce that without losing a massive amount of money. The cost of what you just sold is astronomical, and it's my job to keep that cost low. How do you resolve that problem? Well, you make it, you sell it, and you move on, or you contact that customer and say, actually, it's going to be different. Um, there's a process in that. So when we're talking about this in an IT program, you also have different sides of the coin, right? The business and IT. IT is incented differently than the business. So when your decision contradicts your organization's reward structure, it should go up to a level that allows for effective resolution. That's the easiest way of putting it. In that, if we have a conflict in this decision making process at the core team level because I want to sell as much as possible, and you're telling me that I can't do that because it's going to cost too much money. All right, well then let's go talk to somebody who can fix this problem and tell us which one of us is um, is going to get it the way that they want, or help us find a compromise. That's kind of I don't want to understate the difference in this, but I would say, how do you normally do that in other
Yeah.
circumstances?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I think the only thing I would add to that is just, reminding people that discipline is really not motivation, it's structure, right? So a lot of times, like, that piece of it is misunderstood. And so having a bit of empathy for the other side is always helpful in those conversations. Their job is to sell, right? Should they sell stuff that doesn't exist? Absolutely not, right? But at the same time, like, you have to understand that's how they're paid, in these types of situations. That's their livelihood, right? And they're probably under a lot of pressure, especially right now, to get those sales in by end of month, end of year, whatever, those types of different things,
There's no
and
chicken
being,
and egg conversation in that, right? Well, this organization exists because I sell stuff. Like, well, it also exists because I'm able to make it,
and
right?
that will
If you
be just
sell it,
on.
I can't make it, we won't have an organization. And say, well, if I don't sell it, you can make as much as you want, we won't have an organization. Right. That's why we need each other, right? There's
Right.
a
And
business
I
piece of that
think when
too.
we go to that conversation with our already knowing that we're never going to work together, right? When we start the, well, you don't do this without me, and that's why, when we talk about IT or the business, people have so many polarizing opinions about that. But just know that if you're going to be on one side or the other, you lack discipline, right? you lack the ability to cross collaborate. And so, it's a time we can joke about it and say, oh, but if your teams cannot work together, you have absolutely no business buying anything new, not to mention doing any sort of projects, because they can't even cross operate. So,
I
um,
just got kindergarten cop in my head right now. You lack discipline. It's like I
I've
wish I
never
had an
seen that
Arnold
movie.
soundboard right now, just press the button over and over.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is a lot of discipline. So if anybody needs to think about that, that's what Adam does. So,
Well, he's not
all
wrong.
right. So let's, as we wrap up here, I always want to leave you guys with something that you can do today, right? That you can do today to make sure that you're setting the stage for this, because this doesn't happen overnight, right? Businesses that succeed at this have a variety of different infrastructures in place, not only from an actual technical infrastructure, but from a cultural infrastructure as well. So I want you to give maybe one or two takeaways from this conversation that you could
Yeah,
potentially activate today, and then I'll give a few.
fantastic. Well, I think in the scope of that, I'm going to answer Leo's question as well. Does governance equal discipline or standards and process? And I would say the answer to that is all of these things are different, right? And so when you think about discipline, um, discipline is sticking to your governance and your standards and process. So if you are going to go and do something today, I would start with understanding what are the definitions of our governance standards and processes. Understanding those definitions is the first piece towards being disciplined and being aligned towards them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first piece. And if you find that there aren't any,
Mm-hmm.
your next step is to start building them.
Mm-hmm.
And because without them, these things will happen in their own space. But with them, you have something that we can all work towards, right? It becomes a standard that isn't different for me. It's set for everybody, and we all operate around that. Then that way, we're not pointing fingers at each other. We're pointing towards a shared common goal of maintaining our governance, maintaining our standards and processes. So for me, discipline is sticking to the things that are established in this place. And if they are not established, you can't possibly have discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my answer. What about you?
Yeah, I think this totally depends on how your internal team defines governance and standard processes. So I would start with understanding, do they know what governance means? Do they have standard operating procedures? What does standardization look like in your overall language? Because it doesn't matter what we say, right? It doesn't matter what anyone else says. It matters what your organization is able to align to, and then who holds them accountable. And that to me is always where people, they don't have a problem saying governance, governance, governance until the governance gets challenged, right? And we start to slip on things, and then the accountability is the real discipline that takes the place there. And as if you don't have accountability, then there's no point in having any governance.
Yeah, that's another good point, right? And there's your governance structure is designed to show different levels of accountability too, right? So I do firmly believe in the if everybody's responsible for it, then nobody's responsible for it. It doesn't get done. So there does
Mhm,
have to be in your governance structure some level of responsibility and some level of accountability. Who
mhm,
is responsible when this comes apart? That's becomes who gets to make the decisions on what we do when that happens. And make no mistake, it will fall apart. That's fine, right? Let's not over dramatize the idea that we're going to be perfect every time and this, that, and the other. And
mhm,
if we're not, then we've failed. Um, that's a poor cultural scenario to be in. If we get it wrong once, we've failed. Fail over and over, go and do it, but use your structure and your
mhm,
discipline to recover from
mhm,
failure. And that's what I would encourage folks to think about, because at the end of the day, it's that establishment and sticking to it that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you document it? We can't just be like the Wild West around here, just being like, oops, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work. But we're innovative. We're flexible. No, you're completely disorganized and you're all running in different directions. So I would say my overall advice on, how do you build this out is accepting discomfort, right? Nothing about failing is often comfortable, but if you can do it in a situation where you understand that discipline is slow at first, think about any sort of hard decision you made, whether it was, a weight loss or fitness journey, or a new habit that you tried to form, even a book that you tried to read. There wasn't always, pages in which you were done. You knew you had to get through that part to get to the next chapter. So I think that piece of it is when it starts to you start saying no and people start getting upset, right? Then you're like, whoa, I don't want to be that person, right? I don't want any governance. And
Yeah.
that piece of it, not that one person should or going to be responsible for that, but there are going to be people that, change is uncomfortable in that level and they're not used to being held accountable, or even, cutting those tools that will expose that weakness are things that we see a lot of organizations going, they have too many tools, right? And then the discomfort comes in that, but that's when we have to do things like on the other side, prove it actually works. This is why we did this. This is what happened. This is how the business benefited from it. Communicate that so that the next time that discomfort, though it's still there, gets a little bit easier because we proved the model.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's not supposed to be easy, right? Like I love a lot of the things that Tom Brady says about this. And I love a lot of the things that Mike Tyson says about this, right? And there are a variety of folks in the space that the thought process is you do it if you do it when it's easy, that's not discipline. Discipline is also doing it when it's hard. Um, Being the first one in, working longer than everybody else, from a becoming the greatest football player of all time, which I begrudgingly say I like Tom Brady. I'm not super stoked about the fact he doesn't play for a team that I like, but he didn't play for a team that I like. This is a different story. But
I was like, he doesn't play at all. What are you talking about?
let's take a look at Philip Rivers, right? He's
Oh,
44.
here
He's
we
coming
go.
back to the Colts.
I
So I mean,
shouldn't
like,
have said anything. I
Tom
deeply
Brady
love
can come back.
yeah.
He can play some football, man. I'll bet he's better than Philip Rivers. Uh, but the point remains the same. Doing it when it's hard is discipline, right? Doing it when it's easy is nothing. Everybody does things that are easy. That's not different. Doing it when it's hard is discipline. Mike Tyson's way of putting it was work out when the gym is closed. Work out, you go for a run when people aren't awake. You need to be doing, like, from a super disciplined perspective, and it's an athleticism perspective and a competitive perspective. Doing it when nobody else is doing the things nobody else is willing to do is a different level of discipline. Now you don't need to do that from a perspective of your tech project, right? I'm not suggesting that you go write requirements at 3 a.m. because that's when everybody's sleeping. That's different, right? We got to have a little bit of work-life balance in this. There's room for that, but the core concept remains the same. Discipline is doing it when it's hard too, not just when it's easy to do it. Like, if you do it when it's easy, that's not discipline. That's just taking the easy way. Yeah. What are you laughing at? The
I'm
fact.
yeah, that I mean, it obviously Tom Brady is better than Philip Rivers. Like they're not even in the same sentence. Like obviously he's better than Aaron Rodgers. Like for God's sake, Aaron Rodgers, stop playing football. We are good. Like
He's leading
you
the division right now. He's leading his division. So
is that because of him or is that because of the rest of the team? So
I don't know. If you look at the Steelers, man, it might be because of Aaron Rodgers. They are not a great football team right now. That's a
anyway,
different story.
anyway,
Um, the
anyone that
Chiefs
gets
are
to
going
the
to lose
top
the
of their
playoffs,
sport,
even if
right?
Patrick Mahomes has great discipline, right? So, and I just love saying that. I'll just sneak that in. You're right at the end. At the end of the day, I think that what I like most about this conversation is that behind all of it, this might be the most important thing because we started it out with the Grinch stole your tech discipline, and sitting around and holding hands and singing about it anyway is not going to do you any good, right? But there is a sense of what helps from a community, from a perspective of keeping your tech discipline, is the sense of community and team building that you can have for your overall organization, right? Having a sense of community, having a good team building structure, having great leadership, all of that community is what helps you maintain your discipline together, even when it's hard. Philip Rivers might win you. He might help you with it. He might pick him up right at the end, and all of a sudden, because the Colts are a good football team, they just don't have a quarterback.
Maybe we should do like a sports, half sports cast in this conversation. But I mean, I do think you can draw a lot of parallels. Like if you're at the top of your field in anything, right, you're doing something that people are not willing to do because a lot of times people are not willing to do the hard work to get that uncomfortability of being either a professional athlete or, at the, leadership level of an organization. So there's lots of parallels in that conversation. But I think again, the last thing I'll put in this, and we see this firsthand for organizations that tried to do this with most well-intentioned and kind of fell by the wayside. Whether you have a mentor, an executive coach, or somebody outside of your organization, especially in the leadership level, get that person, right? Because a lot of times these are so complex and you don't know how to kind of, especially in your situation where you're like, am I going for my legacy tech? Am I buying a whole new system that my IT team wants? Am I buying like Salesforce that my business wants? Like, what am I going to do? That is not an easy situation to be in. Get someone that can, you can at least bounce ideas off of,
Yeah,
even if you're, posting on LinkedIn about it. Just know people are going to try and sell you things, no doubt about that. But it's a good discovery process to know that you have no idea what the right answer is, and we've got to
yeah.
figure it out via real data, not emotion, right? So
Well, I love that conversation, and I think I'm gonna try something here and see if our listeners can hold me accountable for this, because I'm gonna test something, and then we can kind of close with this and we can move on to next week. But my thought process here is I have one of the ways I have it outlined is I like to lift weights, right? And I have this shoulder pain here, and at first it started happening on the front of my shoulder, and I started doing particular exercises to strengthen that area. And it felt like it moved to the outside of my shoulder. So I started thinking maybe I have an actual shoulder problem I need to recover. So I started going down the rest path on this, and I've taken a couple of weeks off, and it's getting more sore. And I'm noticing that maybe the thought process here is to go down the path of strengthening rather than resting, and rehabilitating my shoulders through strength. And I think I might try that and stick to it. And that will involve a level of discipline that is outside of my comfort zone, because I like to lift heavy. And I can't do that right now if I'm going to go down this strengthening path, especially with my shoulders. So I think what I'm going to do, and just for the purposes of maybe keeping this up to date on these types of conversations, is I'm going to create my own governance structure around this. I'm going to create a plan for strengthening, and I'm going to just kind of share updates along the way, and maybe share a little bit of the challenges and how hard it was to stick to that, and go from there. Because I think it might be a good example of how these things don't apply just to your business. You can use them in daily life as well, and I think that might be fun.
absolutely. We are excited to hear your journey of shoulder strengthening
And maybe
next week.
Philip Rivers will take some tips from it too, because
Yeah,
he's
I'm
he's
sure he
also
will.
old, and
I have
also
no doubt about that. I do invite you guys to DM us all the time after these
yeah,
conversations. We get DMs that people are like, "Hey, you talked about this. I'm in this specific situation," because it's all so relative, right? What do you think about this? So we're always open to have those conversations. Definitely, very approachable. We both run our own GMs,
yeah,
so get back to you there. So if you liked this, we again love to hear your feedback on what you want to hear next week. And then we will be back next Friday with another conversation. So definitely check us out then. Thank you so much for joining. Audience, great questions. And thank you, Adam, for sharing your insight. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.